Half-Life Alyx's modding community has really come out swinging. Maybe it's the passion for gaming inherent to people who own VR headsets, maybe it's the familiarity with Valve's engines, maybe it's inspiration from the base game's level design, but even without any official tools from Valve, we've gotten some fantastic custom maps for Half-Life Alyx mere weeks after its launch. Needless to say, user-generated content has always been a huge part of the Half-Life legacy. Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, Day of Defeat, the Stanley Parable, Garry's Mod, Dear Esther, all of these were born of a couple people messing around with Half-Life and Half-Life 2's modding kits, and all of them were so successful that they went on to be polished up and sold for money. That's a hell of a lot of commendations for just 2 software development kits. So, with the VR market desperately lacking in high-quality content, the prospect of having essentially limitless community-made levels to play in a game as polished and fun as Half-Life Alyx is incredibly appealing to me. I expect that once Valve releases the official SDK, that could be the final nudge that a lot of people needed to start getting into VR. Suddenly, it won't just be Half-Life Alyx you're buying, it'll also be an all-access pass to years of quality content being made from the community. I should preface this by saying that I have nothing but respect for these creators. They've hacked together a version of Hammer Editor that works with Alyx, they've slowly pieced together how to use so many of the mechanics found exclusively in Alyx, they've largely figured out how to get good lighting on their levels, and they've been performing crazy experiments in the wild frontier of game design that is VR. However, I'll be saying some negative stuff here too, in order to try to explain in further detail what I think works best in VR game design and what doesn't work. A lot of the old ways simply don't apply anymore, and a lot of game design conventions have to essentially be thrown out to make good VR content. I want to know where to begin when designing a VR level, and I definitely want to know how to execute those ideas. Again though, nothing but respect and love for these mappers and their experiments. Anyways, I was honestly expecting to be disappointed by the first batch of community-made levels. They've all been made on a hacked-together version of the Hammer map editor, and as a result, people were still trying to really nail down things like lighting, pathfinding, scripted sequences, custom assets, etc. None of that changes the fact that the people who are making this content are incredibly passionate and really must love Half-Life Alyx. So, without further ado, let's look at one of the first custom levels I played, Emergence by Stranger Than You. This map starts out really trying to capture some of Half-Life's classic horror atmosphere, starting you out in a completely dark laundry room with headcrabs and zombies lying in ambush around every corner. Starting out with a bit of horror really set the mood for the whole map, and had me on edge for the rest of its runtime. As another side note, since we really can't expect to see the same level of visual polish from such an early map that we can from Valve's content, baking parts of your level in darkness can really help the immersion, when the alternative is barren, sterilely lit rooms. The darkness is also good for highlighting collectible items like resin and ammo. Anyways, after ducking a few headcrabs, we eventually get to a room that the Combine must have been using as a forward operating outpost, and the Fabricator immediately caught my eye. But by letting me hear the Combine's idle chatter in the next room, this map really encouraged me to check my surroundings and be on guard as I fabricated my weapon upgrades. When a player in a VR game enters that alert mode, that's when things start to get really fun. Maybe you're putting your left hand on a health station and crossing your right arm over it so that you can have your weapon aimed behind you, or you're slowly, carefully checking every corner as you enter a new room. That's what this section of the map did for me, and I really do give it credit for that. Encouraging the player to make use of their increased situational awareness is a huge part of VR encounter design. However, things did get a bit worse for a second after I finished fabricating. You see, there's this totally normal door here, separating you from the Combine soldiers in the next room. We've also got some cover immediately on the other side of the door, but for obvious reasons the best tactical decision was to stay on my side of the door, and just shoot through the little crack. The door even had a window that I could watch the Combine through, making aiming easier. Forgive me as I get into technical details that I can't be certain about, but it seems to me that the Combine have no actual way of opening doors. As a result of this, they wouldn't even push my cover and try to get closer to the door, simply because once the door was closed, their pathfinding told them that they had no route to me. I could actually make them retreat by simply closing the door. It nullified grenades, it made them unable to attack me whatsoever, and it made the fight essentially meaningless. These soldiers weren't an obstacle, they were an interruption. If the Combine really don't have any AI to open doors, I would suggest using this door breaching prefab and somehow tying it to Combine soldiers, so if a soldier was on the other side of a door, after standing there for a second the door would be breached and the soldier could push through. I would also say that if manhacks became aware of the player a bit sooner and rushed me or just hovered right at the door, they could have heavily deterred this strategy, making me think things through a bit more. This little hiccup in the level's quality was followed up by a couple of lower tier soldiers entering the room, and since it was such a small space, they were all huddled together, meaning that one quick shot to one of their oxygen tanks was enough to bring them all to such low health that I could take them out easily. You might say that this is too easy, and that the level should have given the Combine soldiers more space to get away, but at its core, this was a really fun moment that left a big smile on my face. Good stuff. We fight a few more Combine soldiers, nothing too notable, save for the fact that the enemies didn't push my cover as much as I would have liked. I felt a bit too safe fighting the Combine because of this, and I also had fewer opportunities to use my shotgun, my favorite weapon in the game. While the scarcity of shotgun ammo paired well with this, I'd rather have more shotgun ammo and more aggressive enemies to use it on. The unaggressive enemies also have the emergent effect of keeping me behind the same piece of cover, essentially just waiting for them to stop firing in a red light green light combat loop. I talked about this in my video on the base game's design, but by having more aggressive enemies, and more objects lying around on the ground to interact with using the gravity gloves, these encounters would feel less tedious, as I would always have something to do, be it retreating, throwing back enemy grenades, reloading, or healing. However, this map also gave me one of my more satisfying kills I've had with Half-Life Alyx. There was a guard up here on this lookout post, pretty far from me. I'm generally opposed to long-range combat in VR, as the close-range stuff is where your muscle memory kicks in and you can get some good hipfire shots that feel just great to pull off. But with this encounter, I had just a single long-range enemy attacking me, and an incredibly small piece of cover. I had to duck down low and small to stay out of his line of fire, but one quick shot to his gas tank was enough to take him out. It really wasn't that hard of a shot to make, but the long range combined with my pathetic cover really made me feel like a gunslinging cowboy, which was an awesome feeling. That's about all I have to say about this map. Some notably good design choices, some not so good ones. Lessons to be learned all around. These sections that experiment with different encounter designs than we saw in the base game are all especially valuable since this is such a new frontier of game design. Fun level overall, I'd recommend it. Next up, I played a great little map called Treasure Trouble by G. Veridos. I'll admit, I didn't have high hopes for this map when it started, seeing as I had 1,000 pistol bullets. I figured the whole thing would be overindulgent, with an abundance of enemies resulting in tedious combat encounters, but I couldn't have been more wrong. This might actually be the most restrained map that I played. This map focuses almost solely on the combat, with sparse looting just to even out its pacing. Ammo is basically a non-issue, at least for the pistol, so there isn't nearly as much scrounging around for supplies that needs to be done. Anyways, I was still skeptical at this point. I walked into the first room to find a zombie, and after shooting him down, I moved in closer to get the head crab, and that's when this first Combine soldier completely took me by surprise, shooting at me through a window. This was a fantastic moment. I wasn't expecting to see any Combine for at least the first couple of minutes, so their ambush after taking down only one enemy was really surprising and invigorating. Then, after I took care of the most immediate threat, I saw a medical syringe and a clip on the far side of this window, so I used the gravity gloves to get them and heal up. After taking down the next soldier, I walked back to do a little looting from the shelf and to laugh at a physics glitch, and then I saw this med station. I can't say for certain whether or not this was intentional, but every time I'm nearing a medical station, I look down at my hand to see what my health is, and as a result of this, I walked right into the line of fire of this Combine soldier, prompting me to use this tiny piece of cover to hide and heal up while fighting. A heavy soldier then revealed himself, and I got to do a sweet bit of shooting here, while keeping my hand on the health station. This was just a fantastic encounter, with great pacing, lots of surprises, and badass ways to respond to those surprises. Great stuff. I'll quit breaking these fights down play by play just after I talk about the next one. I walk outside, do a quick check for loot, and then these manhacks flush me out of my cover just in time for some soldiers to see me and start pushing that cover. I take out the first one with the shotgun as quickly as I can so that I can get the heavy before he gets to me, and that's when I saw that the first soldier was carrying a grenade that I could use against the heavy. These two encounters were both very deliberate, and that, if you ask me, is one of two ways to make a great combat encounter with these mechanics, and it's also the mark of a very thoughtful level designer. We'll get to the second method of making a good encounter at the end of this video. Were I to make something like this, I would never consider having the faster enemy carry a grenade to use on the slower one. It's really clever stuff. Anyways, this awesome standard of combat encounters carries on, and the level starts to show off a bit from here, all in a great way. We get a genuinely shocking headcrab in the vents moment, classic Half-Life stuff. We get a super clever moment where we hack something just to find out that all it does is turn on an alarm and we summon a bunch of Combine soldiers. We see that this map is willing to create arenas that encourage using the teleport mechanic to zip from cover to cover, and I even got a nice moment where killing a heavy revealed a Combine Fabricator that was hidden right behind him, right at the end of the combat. Then, this next fight shows off some nav meshing that really makes the Combine feel clever, pushing me in tandem rather than one at a time, but being slow about it to make me feel safer than I actually was. It was great stuff. Furthermore, the fact that this map looped in a big circle, sending me back to the start, meant that the map could reuse certain areas, just in the opposite direction, which kept my frame rates nice and high compared to a larger map. The lesson to be learned from this map is to playtest the hell out of your encounters, and see how players and yourself react to everything. This way you can make every moment of your map feel very deliberate and well thought out. You can control the player's experience in the same way that base Half-Life Alyx and the entire Half-Life series is known for. This one is an absolute must-play. Next up, we've got Crash Course by Sadly It's Bradley. This is another one that absolutely shouldn't be skipped. It's long, it takes the cake for the best map as far as the visuals go, and what really stood out to me was the variety of the encounters and the quality of its scripted events. It starts out with you working in a laboratory that's raided by the Combine, and after those bastards kill the headcrabs you were experimenting on, you get this hilarious moment. Over the course of this map, the enemies are well balanced between being aggressive and being defensive, but beyond that, it sort of lacks the well-considered encounter design of Treasure Trouble. Again though, that's made up for by the visual quality and the variety. You have vertical fights in elevator shafts, you've got long, dark, abandoned underpasses filled with zombies, where it's better to run than fight so long as you look out for barnacles in your path. You've got Half-Life 2 sterilizer turrets that have been ported to Alyx, and you've got one final bang. A fight on this overpass that's super intense, mostly well-paced, and is pretty damn difficult. In fact, the creator recommends you play on normal difficulty just because of this fight. I think if we had a couple more grenades and 2 health stations complete with grubs on this bridge, it would flow a lot better and not feel so jaded. And then we've got a moment at the end of the fight that was so close to being perfect. I can't go into too much detail about it as it spoils the base game, but it involves that special weapon you get in the final 10 minutes of Alyx, the green one. And boy was I excited to see that we figured out how to use that weapon in custom levels. The only issue, however, is that the enemies are far away and stay behind their cover without pushing up. The result of this is that the special weapon is basically completely useless against anything other than rushing manhacks. The mod even gives you a ton of grenades to accommodate this. Again, it was this close to having a perfect ending, but the design of that last group of enemies completely soured it for me. Still, this is a fantastic map, absolutely one of my favorites. However, that doesn't mean that these next maps are losers whatsoever. The next map I played was called Garage Master, also by G Varidos, and seeing as this map was made almost a month before Treasure Troubles, it's the weaker of the two if I'm being honest. The level design was really nice, maybe even better than Treasure Trouble, but the encounter design felt a bit generic and lacked the careful consideration of Treasure Trouble. There weren't many frantic, better act fast moments, and there was a lot of waiting behind cover. In fact, the climactic final fight was just a red light green light situation, waiting for the enemy to stop firing. This could have been avoided if I were able to attack from multiple angles, and if I had things to interact with using the gravity gloves while I was waiting for him to stop firing. Again though, that level design was great. I think if G Varidos were to go back and rebalance this level, combining the awesome level design with his fantastic encounter design that he showcased in Treasure Trouble, we'd have something really special on our hands, and that, combined with better lighting, now that we know a bit more about doing that well, would absolutely blow every map, and even some scenes in the base game, out of the water. I definitely recommend this map just for its level design, but if you take nothing else away from this video, keep in mind that you should be watching G Varidos. I honestly think he's going to be remembered as one of the best mappers of the community. Next up, I played something especially unique. It seems a small part of the community are trying to create a custom game mode called Zen Thug. Specifically, I played Zen Thug Warehouse by Manello. Zen Thug is a horde mode, not unlike Call of Duty's zombie mode. The idea of holding out against endless headcrabs and zombies was executed about as well as it could be, but Half-Life Alyx isn't exactly a feature-heavy game. Grenades, bullets, medkits, and keycards are basically all there is to work with. The lack of a huge arsenal of weapons and tools makes the game's mechanics better suited to linear level design. To accommodate this, I would have liked to see the level gradually open up more and more in the same way that missions in Call of Duty Zombies do. This holdout idea is something that I think could work great in VR, but Half-Life Alyx really isn't the game to pull it off in. Personally, I think that this idea is more well suited to The Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners, a game with a larger arsenal and a much heavier emphasis on survival and your player's state. I will say though that I could see an endless mode against Combine soldiers being pretty fun, but it'd be tough to balance, and you'd still need the downtime you get from a wave of nothing but melee attackers. More than anything, this feels like something that would be made in Gmod, which actually makes me extremely excited for Gmod 2 if it's ever made, and the VR features that are sure to ship with it. I'll definitely keep an eye on this game mode, and again, this map executed the idea about as well as it could, but personally, I just don't think that the game is that well suited to holdout missions, at least not against zombies and headcrabs. This whole thing is going to end on a very high note, thanks to a map that's been in development for over a month now, and is still in beta. The visuals are pretty rough, as that's always the last thing that a good level creator puts serious effort into, but the way that A2F GDT handled his first map, Shipyards, is downright inspiring when it comes to the encounter design. These encounters aren't quite as well polished as something like Treasure Trouble, but they're of a much larger scale, and there are certain simple tricks that the level used to make the gameplay more exciting than in other maps. Specifically, the level starts you out already having the laser sight, the most important and expensive upgrade on your pistol, and you've got 50 resin. This means that right off the bat I had a bullet reservoir and laser sight, making my pistol absolutely awesome. While the upgrade system works great for a game as long as Half-Life Alyx, it isn't that well suited to custom maps, which are naturally shorter in runtime. In fact, after playing through 5 maps in a row, I made a note to mention that it would be very nice to not have to use the early game versions of the weapons in all of these maps, and all I wanted was to start out with a nice pistol and a ton of resin. Then this map delivered. Anyways, moving forward, these encounters are just great. As I said, they aren't so tightly directed, but funnily enough, as the visuals got worse, the encounters just got better and better. They don't feel as linear as the ones in Treasure Trouble, which, when you're going up against this many enemies, just makes the fights feel so dynamic, and like you really have a lot of initiative in them. It's great stuff. This is that second way to make an awesome combat encounter. I mean, just tell me this isn't absolutely badass. And that's when Steam VR just totally crashed on me for the first time in Alyx. I guess that just comes with playing a map that's still in beta. Funnily enough though, I had actually hit a checkpoint as soon as I killed that heavy, so no progress was lost whatsoever. We proceed to a very standard cover shooting section that did a good job to establish the pacing. A nice simple encounter without much danger to cool things down after the hectic fight I just finished. Combat is the downtime, it's just simpler combat than in the rest of the level. This map also used this awkwardly placed health station to establish something that I thought was largely missing from the base game, rewarding the player for not using their grubs on earlier health stations. This was the only grub I'd found at this point, and I held off on using it at 2 separate health stations. If this was the base game, I would have already found another, redundant grub by now, nullifying the reward for my patience and boldness. Moving forward, we just have more of this stuff, quality level design with undeveloped visuals. I can't knock this map for its visuals, as again, it's still in beta, but I will point out how comically small the vault is. It must have been in the actual playable level rather than the 3D skybox. While it won't look too weird in your 2D perspective, with the depth perception of VR it became clear that it was very small and about 30 feet off the ground. Although I will say that the lighting was actually pretty good compared to a lot of the maps I've played. Really, the one negative I'll point out for the entire map was that there was a lot of time between the beginning and this middle section in which there was no resin whatsoever. If the entire map had well-developed visuals like those in this room where we find the resin, it wouldn't have occurred to me to look for more once I got here, and I would have gone through a lot of this mod thinking that I just wasn't meant to be looking for it. Everything else was absolutely great. Honestly, I think that when this map is finished, it's going to beat out even Treasure Trouble for me. And what's more, this map might get a sequel, possibly even multiple. If I understand correctly, this map is planned to be part of a multi-level campaign, just like the base game, so that's really exciting stuff. Fantastic work, 82FGDT. I'm seriously looking forward to playing the final version of this map. Well, save for a couple of really early maps, which are just plain surreal in VR, with broken lighting, absolutely zero pathfinding, and utterly bizarre physics, that's the lot of what we've gotten so far. However, by the time this video goes live, the fantastic people at the Half-Life Alyx Modding Hub Discord will have finished judging their first ever contest, which had a ton of entrants. All of these creators have brought their A-game, so at the time of writing, I'm seriously looking forward to getting my hands on these. I'll be back next week to talk about some of these in detail. In the meantime, however, even this first batch of maps has shown insane potential. Half-Life Alyx is no longer a single campaign. The fact that the community has accomplished this much without any support or even an official toolset from Valve just goes to show that Alyx is going to be a golden age for VR content. No longer will we install random, janky 30-minute demos whenever we're bored and want to do something in VR. All of the absolutely free joy that source mods have brought most of us over the years is finally going to be translated to VR in an incredibly palatable way. This has already been amazingly fun, and these maps are only going to get better.